might have come on. Thank you very much for coming to this boutique finance committee meeting, elite finance committee meeting, on the 11th of February. Just going down the agenda fairly quickly. Apologies for absence. We have got apologies from councillors Wade and Hutton and Royhold. Are we okay to accept those?
Yeah.
Lovely, thank you very much. Declarations of interest. We have 2 grant applications from Volunteer Action and the Choral Society coming up. David?
As my wife is a member of the Choral Society, but not an officer or anything, I suppose I want to declare another interest.
Absolutely, and she's in the photo we got sent. And I should admit, I know the person who's conducting in that photo right, as well.
I'm not sure that's really.
I'm not sure it's publicly declare anyhow. If anything else arises, do let us know during the meeting. 2432, representations from interested parties. We have a period of no more than 10 minutes for the Chief Executive and Charity Manager of Volunteer Action to speak to us. Rachel, thank you for coming.
Thank you very much for having me here.
Do you want to say something, or do you want us to talk, or what's best for you?
I'm understanding there was potentially some queries, so I'm more than happy to help answer those. I'm also more than happy to give an update on VA and what's happening lately.
I'm happy to ask some questions. The only thing is the person that was quite keen on asking the questions isn't here. So I've watched the meeting and I've written down in my best writing some of the questions.
Okay.
So I'll raise them if that's okay. The first question was something about, I think we saw your accounts from 23-24 last time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there were questions about how we moved into a deficit, whereas previously there'd been a surplus. I think is my understanding from the crackled video recordings.
Probably the other way around. I would suggest we've had 3 out of previous 5 financial years have seen quite high deficit.
Right.
So up in the 30,000s plus per year, which had impacted the charity hugely, I would say. And then in the last financial year, which you have seen the accounts for, we were looking at, well, we finished on a slight surplus, so that 9,499 to be exact.
Okay.
Surplus in that year, the first year that we had achieved that in 6.
Which is good.
So it might be that, yes, which is definitely a good, positive thing for the charity, also positive for the community in the way that we are trying to stabilise ourselves as a charity to be able to continue to provide the services to the community. Part of that small surplus is what we call a restricted fund.
Mm-hmm.
So it's part of a project that we took on and can only be utilised for that project. So it's an underspend on that project in that year, and we're bringing it forward into this current year.
And is that a befriending project?
It is.
Yeah.
It's a group befriending project. So at Volunteer Action, we have the 2 core services, which is the community car scheme and also a befriending service. So that's one-to-one, face-to-face in homes. 18 months ago, we took on a new project called Group Befriending, which is to enhance our current befriending. So we receive project funding through county-wide befriending, which is linked with the NHS ICB. So it's coming direct from them to try and reduce hospital and risks by getting the people who are isolated in rural communities, so we were ideal for us up here, to connect in ways with groups, so crafting, cups of tea, anything at all that we put on, weekly events. And the idea is that people talk to each other, and instead of going to the A&E with a small minor complaint, they talk to their friend, and their friend says, oh, that's fine, we can sort that out. So, and it has actually, the project 18 months in has proven to be beneficial to the ICB, which is really good news to hear.
Brilliant.
An impact on basis, yeah.
It's really good news. I've got written down here something about fee increases to cover costs. Your members pay a small fee to join, don't they?
That's correct, yeah. We are at the 13th month, so we've just passed through the first year of introducing a membership fee for our car scheme only. This historically, and we're 30 years old this year, as I sit here now, has been free of charge service as far as membership fee goes to the community. However, this was proving to be the major part of the huge deficits that we were seeing. And that being because we charge the passenger 45p per mile whilst they're in the car. However, to provide an equitable service throughout the rural location that we look after, we pay as a charity 45p per mile to the volunteer to get them to the pickup point.
Right.
So if you live in Luddington in the Brook and we don't have a volunteer there, you don't have to pay more for the service than someone, say, in Oundle, who has a volunteer next door to them. That normally, well, it was equating to about £18,500 a year. We're on track for £21,000 a year that it is costing us as a charity to be able to subsidise those miles, as we call it.
So effectively to send drivers out.
Yeah, and bring them home afterwards
Yep.
as well. So the trustees took the viewpoint that we need to try and bridge this gap in some form of way that was sustainable and a diversifying of income stream way, not just relying on voluntary donations or grant applications, but is there a way that we can stabilise ourselves for the community? And it was decided to trial, and it's been very successful, a membership fee, which works out at £2 a month per member. So it's £24 for the year. We're still trying to keep it as equitable as possible and also tackle poverty where we can. So when you look at comparative car schemes in other counties, they're charging £45 a year to be members of car schemes. We were very, very unique in not doing so. But it is on track to bring in about 10,000 a year, so it is bridging that gap.
Brilliant. There was also an issue raised about what your forecast figures for 24-25 are, I think. So we had those figures which took us up to 24.
Yeah.
And you may have answered this earlier, but just how are things looking for this year and I suppose next year as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't talk about next year because we're just going through the budget and the forecasting at the moment for 25-26. I haven't actually printed off and have with me the forecast for this exact year because we haven't finalised things yet. But we are definitely over at break even, which is fantastic. We are scheduling or anticipating and forecasting a surplus again this year. However, we are utilising that, as you have probably seen on social medias, that we have had to increase our staffing levels to be able to provide the stability for the increased demand that we're seeing.
Mm-hmm.
So we are in a healthy position, but that is all, it's not guaranteed funding. So that's why it's quite difficult to say we will definitely pass the line in that manner. The funding, I'll explain that because that sounds a bit vague. The funding that we mainly receive, which is providing us that opportunity to break even or have a small surplus, is always under the caveat with the council, NNC council, that they'll only pay us if they have the funds to do so. And at any point, if we are not providing the impact that we are required to against the KPIs of any funding agreement that we have with them, then they can retract or remove the funding. So I'm happy to update you all once we have that finalised. So you know a healthy position.
David, Max, do you have any questions at all?
And we'll obviously discuss it later on, but
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything that I probably want to say at the moment.
David?
It's probably a little unfair because you probably don't carry this sort of data around in your head. But in terms of usage, what proportion of your users are actually within the parish of Oundle and what proportion are from outside?
I do have rough figures in my head, so I can certainly, I can certainly get you exact, and I'm more than happy, I'm very transparent with our data to provide that to you. So membership-wise, if I look at that on the car scheme side, it's easier to do that. We have membership-wise just shy of 600 paid members of the car scheme, 400 of which are in the Oundle area only. So we look after everything in East Northants North, so that's A14 upwards to Eastern on the Hill. So it's a wide spread of constituents there that we do support. But Oundle focus, that's the amount of people. It's just underneath. If we look at befriending, again, the majority is within Oundle. The situation that we had, and still actually do live with, is that we were very much known as Volunteer Action Oundle. Everyone assumed that we only looked after Oundle, and that is a marketing aspect that we've been trying to address over the last couple of years. And we're starting to see Thrapston now coming up to about half the membership that Oundle has. So it's slowly growing throughout. Miles-wise, do you want to know miles-wise, mileage? I've definitely got those. They're always-
More data than within reason.
So in the last, in the year that we're discussing now, which is the current one, which is ending, we're on track for 132,000 miles that our drivers have driven. That's in total over the whole of the area. And over 10,000 hours worth of volunteering time and 65 drivers have provided. So they're very, very busy drivers, driving everywhere throughout the country. And that equates to around about 12,500 trips in that year that we're looking at. Just to bring that into focus, I've actually only got, and I'm happy to send through to you in late after this meeting, but I've only got the subsidised mileage figures for the Oundle area, which is it's taking up 15,000 miles. So that is what we as a charity have pledged and paid to be able to support the people that live in Oundle residents. But I can certainly look at the total miles.
Anything for anyone else? No? Lovely. So we have an agenda item later on to discuss the grant application. We will do so as and when. I think that's everything. Any other questions? No? Thank you so much for your time, and thanks for all you do. I know the impact you have on Oundle is absolutely huge. So thank you on behalf of everyone.
Grow as well, and that's the main part, grow our services and also flesh out the services that we currently do and reach more people in need. So that's the main direction. I'd like to also say thank you all so much for the pledge that you have provided us with to date and all the support that you do, so thank you.
No, it's an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
So much. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks, Rachel. Safe home.
Bye-bye, thank you, bye-bye.
Right.
I just push the button.
Consideration of requests from interested parties, 2433. Nothing there. Minutes of the previous meeting, to approve and sign the minutes of the Finance and General Purposes Committee meeting on the 10th of December 2024 as an accurate record. I have them here. Any questions or issues arising from them?
Peter proposed.
Proposed? You were.
Seconded.
Can Max second if he wasn't there?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I vote, so there we are. Everyone's in agreement. Date today. 25. Thank you very much indeed. 233501 to receive the monthly accounts. We all have all the sheets. Thank you, Paul, for generating lots of numbers for us. Are there any questions or queries about anything? Max, David, anything from either of you?
Not specifically. They are what they are.
They are what they are.
We receive them.
I was going to ask one question. I noticed there's a mention on one of the sheets about a flat house rates
Yeah.
issue. I can't remember.
It wasn't an issue, it's because the preschool downstairs were originally paid by the preschool, and then when they vacated, we then started getting backdated rates for them, which is why we've had to pay another £6,000 this year.
Right.
But that would be absorbed for next year, and we've budgeted for it.
It also looks like expenditure at the end of January is 98%, which is quite high. But then we folded into that the walls of the cemetery,
Yes.
buying Fletfield, and the electricity bill at the courthouse. So actually, it's all looking pretty healthy, isn't it, at the moment?
And we also have some additional income in terms of the grant, 70,000.
That's true. Which we can't spend on lots of things.
No.
So that's all good. Right, they are received.
They have been received.
2435 02 to receive the verification checklist for Q3. Any questions or queries?
No.
It's all very verified, and thank you to, is that Jerry who did that? Jerry and John.
Jerry from Spain.
From Spain, even more impressive. And yeah, lovely, thank you very much indeed. 2435 to consider the financial risk assessment. I started looking through that and started thinking, oh, it's always worrying looking through any form of risk assessment.
I've just highlighted something red that I've added that obviously we've since approved to ensure that we have at least 6 months running costs at all times.
Yeah, I was going to ask a question about that, but Max?
Just really two observations. I mean, first of all, you know, having done these in my previous career in the past, I know it's quite a daunting job sometimes to actually think through and get everything on paper, which is great. Organisations that I worked with before, just a very small thing, I'm sure you've thought about this, often actually have a traffic light system just to help you look at it with high being red and low being green and amber.
In terms of risk, high risk?
Yeah, in terms of what would be the HML, it just allows you to use the eye and picks out the H very easily. And the other thing, which I've seen in many other risk registers, which isn't here, which is to do with the consequence of the risk. What I mean by that, you talk about how it's going to be managed, but there's nothing stating what the consequences might be if the risk were to happen or to materialise. Like, would it be financial? Would it be reputational? Would it be legal? Do you see what I mean? And it's useful sometimes to get an idea of what that impact might be, because it then helps you to actually understand whether the HML looks consistent.
So would that come after the management of risk?
It normally comes, ones that I have worked on before with other organisations, it would normally be a column between risk identified and the HML, because the HML then comes from. But if this were to happen, you know,
It's not a big problem, or it's amazing.
Precisely. And just an idea, I mean, it might help you with moving forward. I don't think it'll be, well, certainly the first thing is just 10 minutes coming in, but the second one, you know, I think when, not necessarily obviously for now, but moving forward, you might want to just think about it, because I think it really does help to see whether you've got the HML right. Just an idea.
That's a good idea. What do we do with that? Do we?
I'm happy as it is. I don't.
That is worth something looking at maybe in the future.
Yeah, I'm not doing it tonight.
This has got to go on next
Yeah.
next week's agenda to be approved before our end of the year.
No, I'm happy to approve it as it is. It's just really an observation you might want to think about moving forward, that's all.
Yeah.
No, that's fine.
No, they're very good ideas. David, anything from you?
No, other than that, I'm quite impressed with that thought, because it hadn't really occurred to me to show it as part of this. But,
You've impressed. That's good. I scribbled a couple of things down. One is the market site inspections to confirm pitch sizes. Do we do that?
Sorry.
Sorry, it's line 1.4. Site inspections to confirm pitch sizes and terms and conditions reviewed annually by the Estates Committee. I'm not sure we do that.
I mean, Morag's down there most weeks.
So that's inspecting.
Any new people are obviously told how much it is. You know, we tend to charge £13 for a 3x3. Obviously, the bigger they get, the more they're paying. Yeah, she does monitor it.
Okay, that's fine. If that's how it works, that's fine. The other worrying thing for me on that line, in the second last column, it says Estates Committee to review.
Yeah,
And then it says Finance Chair to,
yeah. Well, that's because, I think it's just the way the lines have come.
It has, but there's nothing in the next one.
Finance chair to review is on the next page.
Yeah,
Is it? Oh, it is.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to have to jump out of a window or something. That's fine, as long as I know what
And that
I'm doing.
relates to the
Income review.
monitor
Yeah,
finance.
that's fine.
Quarterly.
And the only other thing was the thing you've done in red. As I recall, I think the decision of the council was that it would normally be a minimum of 6 months reserves held rather than a minimum. So is it worth putting normally in, just in case for some reason they wanted to fluctuate down a
to
bit?
not.
Sorry, no, 3.1, the reserve.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I know we said normally.
Mm.
I've tried it another one, so what's that, would it be that there would be a time where we wouldn't have that?
As I recall the discussion that I watched, it was, it would normally be 6 months, but then if for some reason, since there's no obligation for us to keep 6 months, there might be a moment then the council decided to move below that. If we say it has to be 6 months, we tie our hands a little bit. Normally it just gives us that bit of wiggle room.
What do you define as reserves? Because we've got unity,
Mm-hmm.
unity reserves as well as CCLA.
I suppose the whole lot,
Okay.
because whatever reserves general is normally in that set case. So I just thought it could be minimum of 6 months reserves normally held.
I can't add it in at the moment.
No, it's
Just
fine.
probably let me edit it, I will do.
That's
I'll
fine.
add it.
So any other points? We just need to consider this, don't we? We don't need to.
Yeah, but this is
approve it.
then going to go to full council for approval.
Lovely. 243504 to consider the internal control policy. Max, David, any?
Yeah, I did have a comment, so I'm trying to find it now. Yeah. I think I did. No, sorry, this one I'm absolutely, I was thinking of another document. This one I'm happy with.
Lovely. David?
I can't see any obvious changes to make.
You haven't changed any of that.
Yeah, as far as I can see, there's nothing new in there. I can't see any reason to change anything.
The only thing I was wondering if there's any ramifications. Point number 11, property. It says the clerk will ensure the play and recreation areas are checked weekly, which are clearly the playgrounds. Does Fletton Field,
They've all of that.
All of it, so plain field comes in.
Cemetery, churchyard.
that's fine, lovely. No, that's good. So that is considered, and again, we don't need to do anything beyond considering it, but we like it. 243505 to consider the internal audit review checklist. Max, is this the one you have?
Yeah, I think that was the one that I had a comment on. And I'm just trying to. The first one, it was just a bit confused. On the final page, it just says internal audit understands the council. Am I right in thinking that's just a continuation of ensure the right resources are available?
Yeah.
I just wasn't, I
Yeah.
kind of made that assumption.
It's
but
just how the,
when I read it, I was thinking, is that,
Yeah.
or is that not? Okay, but that's fine. And then the second thing, somewhere here, I will find it in a minute. Yes. A bit of a tricky issue. This is under 4, relationships. And of course it says responsibilities of council members are understood. Training of members is carried out as necessary. And I know you really try hard to get councillors to go on training. The response is not necessarily what you might hope. And that's nothing to do with you trying. But I just sometimes wonder whether or not we do take that seriously enough, and whether or not, well, we share an opinion. And whether there's anything we can do about it.
Well, I can't force you to go into that.
No, I agree with that.
Ideally, I'd like you to go on it. There is a budget for you all to use.
Mhm.
I think it's important. It's important for us as staff to do the training, but it's equally as important for you because things do change. You know, and the training at MCAT,
I guess what I'm trying to say is try to actually support you as best as we can. I wonder whether or not we might need to talk sometimes in a full council meeting about the importance of training and the necessity for council members to understand what their responsibilities are. You see what I mean? And the danger is I think we take some of it for granted, and it might just be helpful to you if we have a bit of a discussion about it.
Yeah.
So far you spent £48 out of 1,800.
Yeah, says it all really.
Very frugal.
I mean, it could be something that we could start as of the May.
Mhm.
I think now is not the time, but when we go into the new cycle, if that's the right word, then I think that might be a time for you to make it very clear to the new council how change it will be. We simply don't know about those responsibilities. Because I think there is a danger we just take it for granted. You know, you say the stuff at the beginning, you know, one wonders how many times one actually looks at it subsequently.
Just on that point though, and I've made this point a number of times, I always look at the NCALC options and I always look at all the dates and I find that I can't do any of them. So it's maybe we should look at asking NCALC to do something bespoke here at a time that we can do, because I'd love to do some of them. But
You mean bring training
They
here?
can do it, but then that.
Just get them to
that
change their
becomes
dates.
difficult as well, because I've just had some dates come through from Danny for this vision workshop. He's in March, which is when John suggested we have it. He has no weekend dates, so he's only got he's only given me 2 weekdays.
yeah, no, I'm saying,
So they've only got limited staff, and they are, you know, they can't offer. They offer it evenings and weekdays, you know, throughout the week. But from the amount of training and the years that they've been doing, they know if you put a training course on a Friday night, it's not going to happen. So they know the times that
I appreciate that, but I don't get 2-hour periods in my day when I can do training courses. That's just a fact of it.
But they do them in the evenings as well. They'll sometimes do it the same time in the day and then another time in the evening.
Okay.
And sometimes the things that they do each year, they'll have throughout the months as well. So
Yeah, again, okay, fine.
I know we get the details. I think one of the practical problems is that often councillors don't really know what ideally they should be looking for in terms of training. So whether there is any role for clerk and or mayor to make recommendations.
And I think that's partly what I was suggesting through having a wider conversation.
I can definitely
So I very much support what you're saying.
I can definitely tell you what I think should go.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that would be pretty helpful to have at the start of the next year, and then, I don't know, update it on a sort of quarterly basis, if, depending on how sort of much notice we get, of course, I suppose.
No, I definitely do.
Any other points or queries? I had one question, and it might show my lack of knowledge on things. Do we meet the auditor as councillors?
You could do. I mean,
It
just
suggests it's an area of development.
since lockdown, we've done it via email and things, haven't we?
Yeah, via Zoom.
So, but I think this year team is looking to.
She would welcome a mayor or anyone.
Yeah, I mean, we have in the past, but now they're deputy now. But again, obviously that is generally in the day, and it's generally sometime in May.
Well, sometime in May, I might be able to do Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, but I won't be doing it properly, so that's fair enough. Okay, so we'll leave that in as an area.
Yeah, which was the last, I don't know, well, I would say it's been since 2019, we've not actually, she's not been over, has she been over once?
And she's been over once.
Yeah.
Before that it was John, wasn't
Yeah, I mean, John he used to come every year.
it? Yeah.
And we had Mayor and Deputy Mayor in there as well.
Right. Sorry. 243506 to consider the grant application from Volunteer Action. So we've heard Volunteer Action. We've given them a grant of £2,000 from December. They were asking, if I remember, for up to £7,000 then. And unfortunately, when we were talking about it, the sound started fading in and out. But I think the idea was to come back, and we have it in the minutes here. It was agreed we give £2,000 to VA and revisit the grant application at the next finance meeting. It was also agreed that we ask VA to answer some of the financial questions that were raised, which they've done tonight, so they can be considered during the next meeting.
I'll just ask two questions before we actually do.
Yep.
One, how much money have we got left in the grant budget? And two, oh, thanks. I should have looked up.
Don't forget, we've got to take 3,000 off that
For the minibus.
primary school,
Right.
because they've come forward now and said they want their money. They want the money, well, they're ready.
They're ready to go.
Yeah.
It's already taken that out. So I'm paying that on the 20th. So it's already
Yeah, it's already in there.
Yeah.
So is that a sum at the bottom of the
So
line, 9,000?
9206.
So 9206 has been taken and the budget is 15.
And that includes the £2,000 already.
It does, yeah. That was in December.
So we still have some funds available.
And the other question was, do we have another F&GP meeting before the end of our financial year?
No,
I
this
didn't
is
think
it.
we did. Yeah.
Just having watched the meeting afresh, one of the big discussion points in December was whether to pay the grant, whatever its value in total, or whether to pay it on a monthly basis. I think, David, you had experience of
the monthly basis because of past experiences. Not with VA, I hasten to admit.
that was discussed in December. So pay £500 a month over until whenever the money were to run out. Max, any thoughts?
Yeah, I do. I think, first of all, I just want to preface any remarks by saying, you know, they're clearly an excellent charity. They do sterling work for the town and the area. I think it's also important that they, you know, physically seem to be based here. I think that's very good for the town in general and the council. I think what concerns me with this particular application is it just looks a bit woolly. What I mean by that is that, you know, they talk about the project and the fact that they are subsidising mileage to the tune of £15,609. They don't, it's not clear to me that they really define what the project is. You have to rather assume that it's trying to offset the cost of that thing. I think the other thing is that, and David, to my mind, asked a very critical question, which is, well, how much of that is the town as opposed to the area? And I'm not sure we really got that much further on that. And I think the thing that bothered me most is they talk about other financial support they receive, but it's not clear what that is used for. Is it going to be used in relation to the project? I just don't know. And then at the end, they don't really say how much they want. They basically say, as much as you can give us. And I just think that's just not appropriate, if I'm perfectly honest. I think they need to be much clearer about what they want, why they want it, how it fits into their budgetary gap.
Emma, you wanted to mention something?
Yeah, just looking, the amount that, it was my understanding that the amount, I can't find it now, what's it saying?
They were asking for up to 15,000, well, my reading of it, but, you know,
But I don't know.
well, Chris is right, I mean, the point is, it's a bit woolly, and one way or another, they are in surplus, and they also have a decent reserve. On the other hand, if we have £5,794 in the budget, and the Corps Society are looking for 750, we would have £5,000 brought.
Just to clarify a couple of points, the project, most of the use of the word project in the form is us asking about project. They use the word project once in their writing. And also, the amount of funding requested is simply as much as the town council could provide. So they haven't put a number of 15,000. That's simply, I think, they had to fill a box that we asked them to. But the only thing they're asking for, as much as we could provide.
I think that is what it costs for them taking the people of Oundle to where they need to go. So that is what it costs.
Yeah.
And I think if you remember at the December meeting, I think Joe said that Warmington pays all of that.
It was
all of the people in Warmington, the Warmington Parish Council pays 2,000 something to volunteer action to cover the costs for their people in Warmington, and 15,000 is what it costs for people in Oundle.
So that should be in the application. Do you see what I mean?
Well, I think the application was done in November. We talked in December and said, we've got some questions.
Yeah.
She's now come and answered the questions. So the
And if
application
I
hasn't been
understood her
updated.
answers correctly, she says, look, it costs us 21 grand to do it, because that's the extra amount we pay out
To get the drivers out.
to get the drivers to where they need to be and so on. And the membership figure will bring in about 10, so it suggests there's a quote unquote shortfall of around 11 grand.
Paul,
With about 2/3 of that representing the Oundle front.
Paul.
There was one question from Max, and Rachel said the 600 people they deal with, of which 400 were from Oundle.
Yeah, so it's roughly 2/3 of
Yeah, that.
Yeah.
And,
And it costs, sorry,
and the other query was, your grants budget is £5,000 for arts, and £3,000 have so far been spent. That's not community support. So you still have the same amount of money as we said before.
Yeah.
I mean, and one other question as well, which is, all of our accounts go up to 31st of March. So if you want to spread that cost across the next 9 months, only anything paid up until the end of March will come out of this financial year.
Certainly
If
right.
that makes sense.
It does. I think also she mentioned that, I wrote this down somewhere, but I can't work out where. The specific mileage in Oundle was, I seem to recall it was £6,800 in terms of getting drivers to and from Oundle locations, which is about 7,000 which is the number we were talking about in December.
the subsidised mileage figure today, this financial year, has cost the charity £15,609, and that is just people in Oundle. So that is what they're subsidising.
Again, just to reiterate, I really want to support them. I just don't think it's a particularly good application.
Now, well, I think that was the point in December, so this is sort of the second tranche. I suppose the other thing to remember is that we effectively help BA by providing offices in here as well.
Which it says rent.
They do pay-
And then the pays rent, but yeah, that could be more expensive somewhere else or something other. So it's, Warmington might say, here's some money for mileage, but we say here's a lovely warm home as well. So I think the feeling is we should pay something. The idea of £500 a month was mentioned last meeting, but in terms of this year's budget, that would only get us up to the end of March, is that right?
Yeah.
Then we'd have to do what? Decide to pay it again? Or could we make a decision for next financial
But
year?
that money would then become
That's
less
messy.
next year's budget.
Yeah, I understand.
Whereas in this year's budget, you have 5,000 and some odd pounds, £5,800 left.
Which is the same as giving them £500 for the next 10 months. But it's,
The other thing is that their financial year also runs from April to March, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So I'm not quite sure what relevance of that is. There's not much left of their financial year,
No.
so.
but they would carry it over to next year.
Yeah, I presume they can, can't
David?
I was just thinking, if we don't have another F&GP, but we would have a full council meeting in April, we could provide funding for a period of, in fact, January, retrospectively, February and March for the rest of our financial year. And then in April, full council could look at whether to continue making a monthly payment. Even if in fact all they did was then authorise it for April, bearing in mind that we'd have elections in May and a new council, and it probably all needs to be revisited at that point.
I think you've also articulated what was possibly circling in my head, in that if we think about it in terms of financial years, so we are essentially subsidising their current financial year, and then we look at it again once they've got those end of year figures and come back to us, I think, maybe. I don't know.
I think, sorry, just answering your point, David, if in the April meeting, the council decided to pay £500 a month for the rest of the year, the fact that we have an election in May would make no difference because that decision would still stand.
And you're right, the question is whether in principle it would be a good idea for an outgoing council in the sense to tie the hands of the incoming council. And personally, I'd be saying in April, I think we should only look at it for that month, potentially, and then have our election in May, have our first meeting in May, and in a sense,
I think that's
revisit the issue. I know it's a pity because it means we're going to be looking at it now, April, and potentially May. But if we're going to fund it other than in a lump,
Just on that basis, imagine there's 100 residents watching this now, and they regard volunteer action as a really important thing in Oundle. And we're talking about having 3 separate meetings to give them up to £5,000. Why don't we just agree to give
all
them
of that is true.
Yep.
Sorry, I'm going to diverge a bit. I chair a funding council meeting for one of the UK research councils. And I always have to remind people, and I think it's true here, you have to make a judgment on what's in the application, not what you think should have been in the application. And that's what I'm trying to do. In terms of the application, I don't think we can actually make a judgment about funding it month on month throughout 25-26, because there isn't enough information.
well, I mean, there's also another issue.
Can I just clarify? So what are you?
Well,
Because remember, this application came for us in December. We had a 30-minute conversation about it then. They've come in and answered the questions.
sort of.
Well, they're the questions. I wrote them down this evening. So they're the questions from the recording. Are you saying if we can't, because you just said we can't from this do a month by month, are you saying we can't therefore do any grant?
It partly goes back to David's issue about the extent to which, on the basis of this particular application, we effectively tie down quite a large proportion of funding for what might be a new council, what will be a new council, first of all. And also, To me, it's just, as I said, it's a woolly application. Now, I'm trying to find a way in which to support this. You know, if this were almost from any other charity, I wouldn't even be having this discussion. I'd say no. You know, but they are very, very, you know, their work is so important to a large part of the community of this town and the area. I want to support it. But on what we've got in front of us, it's quite difficult.
But we're not judging it just on this, are we? This is what came before us in December. People ask questions, so Rachel's coming this evening to answer those questions.
And
if
maybe
what
I'm
she said,
disadvantaged because I wasn't at the
I understand that, absolutely.
This is the problem. I'm seeing this for the first time.
Absolutely. So whereas
And I think that's possibly where
I'm seeing it for a second time, and I watched the video again this afternoon, so I've relived that December conversation. David.
I almost hesitate to raise this point, but I mean, I could envisage come drawing up a budget for what would then be 26, 27, which we'd start to do towards the end of this year. There may very well be an argument for saying, look, VA is so important to the town that we should be building into our budget a level of support for it. And there's also the CAB and so on. And maybe we need to have a bit of a rethink about our budgets in this area. But at the moment, I'm just looking at this in a pretty short-term way because we do have this election coming up in May, and I don't really want to make a decision that looks as if it's designed to tie the hands of the future council. I would be perfectly happy at this stage to say that we give them an immediate lump sum of £1,000, say, we give them another £500 in March. We then put this on the agenda in April to consider whether to make a further payment, possibly in a similar sum. And then the new council has to get to grips with this issue from May onwards. And I know it's messy, but I think it's probably the best way of dealing with it. And to some extent, it meets Max's point because it will give more time, particularly if we say to VA, look, come the end of the year when we're putting together our budget, if you want us to provide you with a level of ongoing support throughout the council year, this is what we want from you.
I call the shots. I like that. I think that's a very good compromise, David, if I can say so. Because I think it shows that we are giving support, but making it very clear that we want them to come back once we've got a new council. Sorry.
No, Karen.
No, I was going to next.
I like David's suggestion. I think it's a good compromise. I also like what you suggested first. Given that this is so important for the town and the area, and the people that live in this town and area, it may actually help, as you rightly say, whether we think of, the fact that we should be making a regular contribution of a certain sum in order to subsidise what is a critical service to ratepayers here.
I think this meeting tonight should agree to pay £2,000 like we did before Christmas, that will cover January, February, March, April.
Absolutely.
And then come May, new council comes in, we can look at it again.
That's
rather than
much neater.
do it now, have another meeting in April, and then another meeting in May.
I'm happy with that.
Yeah, it's much neater.
Highlighted on the screen, anyone who's had a similar sort of amount since we've been doing grants. I won't read them out.
Yeah. just doing impact assessments.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. There are perhaps certain organisations within this town that we value considerably and therefore put money and support into, and are probably likely to go on doing so, although that's for the May elected council perhaps to revisit. In terms of Emma's proposal, I mean, it's certainly a lot less complicated than doing it the way I suggest.
Absolutely.
I'm quite happy to go along with that.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right.
I'm
just going to
come out of next year's budget anyway.
just going to make the point again that, and I'll probably get outvoted, so I won't make it too strongly. But effectively, we are taking the precept from the residents of Oundle, and we take a fair chunk. We've got an organisation that serves a large number of the people of Oundle, and we're being asked to help fund them. And it just feels to me, at least, that we're doing it in a slightly overly complicated fashion. The 2,000 solution, I think, is a good one. But you know, could we go to 2.5 or 3 with the money's there? I know it will go into next year's pot and all that sort of stuff, but we've already had a 30-minute conversation about this in December. Is there a reason we wouldn't go above that? Is there a reason we're fixed at 500 a month?
I mean, I suspect the reason that we came up with the figure is that 6,000 a year, which is quite a significant sum, sounded, arguably about right. I mean, you can play with the figures as much as you like, and if you justify a higher figure, you could possibly justify a lower one. The advantage of going for that is it has a neat correlation. It's effectively a £500 a month award, but it would then be clear that it was only running until the end of our current council term, and it would be for the new council to decide. And if the new council wants to pay it at £750 a month for the sake of argument, so yeah.
And we'll also have the provisional accounts for the year end and the budget for next year.
A bit more information for the council, anyway.
Right here.
Accepting, as it were, the clerk's advice about the mechanics, I'm happy to propose that we pay them £2,000, indicating to them that it is calculated on the basis of £500 a month for the first 4 months of this year, and that the anticipated way forward is that the matter will be reviewed following the council elections in May.
Yeah, did you want it paying £500 a month?
Well, I'm happy to pay it as a lump sum, because as you say, it's there, so let's give it. I'm slightly less worried about you and the organisation, £2,000 when it's got 100,000 of reserve. So,
Anyone willing to second £2,000? Maxis?
Yeah, I'm going with the revision.
Okay, all those in favour? I'm going to say I'm against, but only because I think we're being under-generous, but it won't make any impact, so that's fine. Right, thank you very much indeed. 243507, consider the grant application from Oundle District Choral Society. This was previously, apart from last year, £500 a year. This last year it went up to 750, and this year it's a 750 application again. Any comments or questions?
I mean, I tend to go to their events because they're good at in them. I mean, I went to the Christmas time concert in December. The church was packed. It's very professionally done. And that doesn't come cheap because they're paying, if you like, the orchestra leader. They're paying soloists. They're contributing something to the orchestra that's invariably from the school. And the council does get a good acknowledgement from it. Now, okay, audiences would be a couple of hundred or so people. I guess that's the sort of usual figure to get into the church for an event like that. It's a relatively small part of the town proportionately, but it's been part of the cultural life of the town for a long time. And without appropriate levels of funding, it's going to struggle because the concerts do run at a loss. The people who sing for pleasure pay for the privilege of doing it, they don't get paid at all. And the ticket prices are kept reasonably low in order to make sure that concerts can sell out. So personally, I'm not perfectly happy to propose it.
Matt?
It's the sort of thing that certainly I like to see happening. It's a relatively modest amount of money, £750. I guess the question I would ask is this. You could turn it around. If they give a performance a year and 75 people attend, it means that we're subsidising their ticket price by 10 quid a head.
It's two concerts, and I suppose there are 200, 250 going, so it's around 500 people attending. So subsidy is probably about £1.50 a head if you.
So that sounds national. I mean, I don't, I think it's a good thing. It's not, it's not just about the audience, it's also about the people that perform as well. We all know that singing is good for people's well-being and all that kind of stuff. It's the kind of group that I think is important to have in a town like this. All I would say is that given that they've been going since 1913, their funding model doesn't seem to be very sustainable. I mean, I do wonder how they've actually managed to continue with this.
I don't know for how many years, in a sense, it's been pitched in quite the way it has been in recent years with professional singers coming in who are often world class, and so on. I mean, it costs. The trouble is, in a sense, we're spoiled because in Arundel it's the sort of level of cultural activity we kind of come to expect.
I think where I'm very supportive of this is, say for example, as you know, I put on concerts and events myself, but that's bringing people from outside inside. This is the community singing for the community, and that's what I like about this.
Fair enough. I suppose my only question is, we've just talked about the other grant and talked about the willingness of it, and it feels a little bit like this is just a number picked from the air at 750, but yeah, that's fair enough. So I'm happy to propose that we pay a grant of £750 for the Arundel, I think it's district, it says on the application district, but we'll go with district. The District Choral Society, if anyone's willing to second that. And there we are, we're all voted for it. So there we go. Thank you very much indeed. Last item on the agenda, any other business for report only? Max, anything from you? David?
Nothing from me.
Emma? Nothing from me. So there we are, 8:30. Thank you very much indeed.